Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone very, very, very mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So I feel like the past week or so has been like watching some sort of soap opera drama on CBS when I was a kid. It's like every day something crazy is happening. Every minute now it seems, especially with social media and with Twitter, you go on there and it's like, oh my gosh, the whole world is on the edge of World War III, and there's a ceasefire, then there's not a ceasefire, and Iran, then they bomb Israel, and I think a lot of us were sitting on the edge of our seats because what was it like only a week or two ago we had these No Kings protests across the nation, and we're concerned about civil unrest, and you're seeing that LA is turning into a third world country, which I guess that's been happening for decades now. California as a whole. Apologize to all the California listeners, but you probably agree with me that California is not the nice American free place to be. But just looking at all this, I find it to be just confusing. But whenever I feel like I'm confused and watching what's happening in the world, I like to take a step back and think, okay, what's really going on here? Well, we know that the global financial system, right, this debt-based, fiat-based system that's really tied into the US dollar, this system is nearing its end. We're nearing a place where the overprinting and the inflation and the debt is just hitting that part of the curve where it's almost going straight up. And it's not sustainable. It's almost like the American government has a credit card that it's like an 80% rate on the credit card, and you're only making enough to cover a 5% rate. You have to keep borrowing more money to keep paying your bill just to pay off the interest on the money that you borrowed. And you can never touch that core balance, that principal balance. And it seems like the whole world is in this weird place. And I'm not sure how you feel, but for me, it just feels weird. Like the world feels just strange right now. And you get this sense that some sort of big change is coming, yet you don't know what it is. And anyway, so joining me today is my good friend Collin Plume. And what we're going to be looking at is trying to break down some of the bigger picture aspects of what's happening in the Middle East. But far beyond that, is a war, or is the need for a war to cover up a financial collapse, a global, collapse of this debt-based system, which has become completely out of control. And my own research and a lot of the guests I've had on before, like Martin Armstrong or Tom Luongo, I really trust their instinct when they've kind of put forth this exact same idea, is that you have to trace these things back to the banking system, right? As they say, all wars are bankers' wars. And so even though Trump has been really trying to thread the needle here and trying to figure out how to get some sort of long-lasting peace in a region that's really never been peaceful, if the bankers and the elites behind these politicians, if they don't want peace, it's going to be really hard to have peace. That's just the reality of it. So Collin and I are going to be looking at breaking down what's happening with the ceasefire, how that might affect some other things, but then diving into how it affects precious metals and so much more. So please enjoy the interview with Collin Plume. Collin, it's great to have you back on the show, man. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Seth, thanks for having me on. No, so much to talk about.
Yeah, it seems like the past 3 to 4 days that the world has been like pushed to the brink of nuclear war multiple times. We finally, got this announcement of a ceasefire, and then we find out. Actually, I'll pull up, just a quick, Fox News article that then Israel accuses Iran of violating the ceasefire with missile and drone strikes and threatens more strikes. It reminds me of like I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, like they're fighting in the room over something. I go in there, like, okay, June, give Grace the ball, Grace, give June the stick. And then it's like, okay, we're settled. And like, I go out and 10 seconds later, I hear screaming again. It seems like that's what's going on over there.
I mean, they've been fighting for so long. I don't know if they know how to stop fighting at this point. And I think, my opinion, Iran is trying to save face, right? I think that, they've said that they're going to destroy Israel and they're going to destroy their enemies. And even though in theory, this is probably going to end up being, the ceasefire long-term is definitely better for the people of Iran. It's just, they're just so used to pushing this agenda and this hate and And it's ideological, right? I mean, it's not something that can turn, um, so much of their time and energy has been funding these terror groups out there to try to undermine, democracy and also Israel and many other things. So I don't think you can just kind of turn on a dime, but it does seem that a lot of it was just to show that they're not weak. And, I think the Ayatollah too doesn't want to lose power, right? So I don't think he can just back off immediately because he'll seem weak. And I think he's trying to protect his livelihood and also probably protect himself in general. I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves the country at some point here and is on a plane to Russia or somewhere to get out, because it seems like there's going to be a movement there to take over that government, whether we're involved or not. I just think it's moving in that direction. But it's definitely sent some shockwaves, through the markets. People are looking at, safe havens and what to do with their money and, asking a lot of questions. So it's not your typical summer type of dynamic that it's a little slower. And we've seen a lot of movement in the markets. And interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of, clients that bought from us during the COVID that said, they're bracing themselves from another potential, if we end up getting pulled into this conflict, they think that precious metals will do really well. And if you look at silver this year, silver's outperformed the S&P, silver's outperformed Bitcoin this year. So silver's really started to take off, and platinum's also performed really well. So you're seeing these things that I think you and I have been talking about and thinking it's going to happen, but you're seeing these industrial metals really start to take off. And I think it will continue if we continue to send bombs. Silver is a big part of it. They use silver so much of that technology. So I think it's a strategic play for hedge funds and also just regular investors. They see the opportunity in silver right now. So I think it's been a very interesting time. Hopefully we can stay out of this conflict and also hopefully we undermined a nuclear threat, a pretty dangerous one.
And one thing that, I guess one place my mind goes to, and just part of how my head works, is I'm always kind of asking the why. I got, in trouble a lot as a kid for that. Well, why is that? Well, why is that? Like I would never, accept just, okay, here's the answer you must accept. It's like, well, it wasn't good enough for me. And so when I think about this situation, with the Middle East, and I reflect on conversations I've had with people like Martin Armstrong or Tom Luongo, or people that I have a lot of respect for their kind of overview of what's happening, not just with finance, but more just the intersection of like finance, global economy, and geopolitics, right? And so much of what we see happening is theater, but behind the scenes, or holding the puppets, you get back into the banking industry. And there's been so many voices out there saying that the global kind of banking system built off the back of the fiat dollar as a reserve currency and this overall kind of debt-based economy, that it's reaching its end, right? Like every fiat currency has a life cycle, and it's this global financial system is reaching its end, and that the bankers and the globalists, they need a war. Like it's like, we'll look at like with Putin, like they've been poking him nonstop. Hey, just press the button, just press the button, just press the button, because they need this war to create a reset. And so it makes me think, if Trump is negotiating a ceasefire, which it seems like there's a lot of hostility even towards Netanyahu, which is interesting. Obviously, there's hostility towards Iran, but it makes me think, is he trying to kind of throw a wrench in the plans of making sure that World War III happens?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And obviously there's the, military industrial machine too. There's so many companies that profit on us, escalating and going farther and sending more of these. What did I see? The B-2 bomber, each B-2 cost 2.5 billion or something to that. So, there's so much profit to be made in us continuing the battle. And talking about the banks, I don't know if you have researched or done so much, but the BIS, I've been researching more and more, and I think I'm going to write like maybe a short white paper on the BIS. But I think a lot of people aren't familiar with where all the international swaps and trades happen. This BIS, and they're their own sovereign. They are their own sovereign nation. Um, and so if you look at this kind of institution, this institution does want turmoil. It does want conflict. It's looking for this to happen. And if you dive in even farther into the BIS, you realize they have their own military, and they're similar to like other organizations. They're like sovereign in ways where they don't have to. Uh, they're not beholden to anyone. They have their own set of laws. They're protected. So the banking institution, I agree with you. I think, is this war, is what's happening there, is a lot of this to get our attention off what's really happened, which is that all fiat currencies are in a very desperate and declining situation. Um, and so that is troubling for bankers. They want people to continue to have these currencies and keep money in the bank and really kind of focus in this direction. Also, and I don't know if it's just kind of timing, but this is also when gold is becoming a tier one asset, right? That's going to happen July 1st too. So gold is becoming more of the replacement of the dollar. And so you have all these things happening, on the forefront in the news. You have these conflicts, but really, the U.S. is still, $37 trillion in debt. This new big, beautiful bill is going to increase our debt, they said, over 10 years by 2.4 trillion. And that's independent of other debt that we're already accumulating. So sometimes I always wonder, is it a little bit of like the wag the dog situation where we're trying to get our attention away from really the problem, the fundamental problem, which is a simple problem of just overspending. And I look at, everyday Americans, talking to them about they're still battling the increase in cost of goods, what happened from COVID and the overspending that we did in COVID, and like dumping all this money out there, devaluing the dollar, devaluing their currency in such a steady way. So I think it's, sometimes I look at these situations as like, is this really the conflict that's what people should be looking at? Or are they trying to take their attention away from the bigger problem, which is that really our debt is out of control, our spending is out of control, and day to day people are still struggling to put food on the table. The wages are not going up enough. Real estate is in a terrible situation. I mean, that's, I think Powell and Trump, after this conflict sort of like is no longer the story. I think Powell and Trump will be the big story that rides the news for the remainder of this year and until Jerome Powell's out of office.
Yeah, you made a good point though, just in the fact that I think a lot of what we're seeing is a distraction, and not to say
Right.
that I'm not saying that there's not real bombs flying and that there's not real
Sure.
people that are dying, but
Yeah.
it's sleight of hand, right? And you look at the media and the infighting and all this stuff that's happening. But I do agree though that it's like a couple weeks ago, all this discussion was on the big beautiful bill, and you had Elon Musk who's very anti big beautiful bill, Trump who's very pro. Yet everyone kind of divided in the middle. But a lot of people saying, look, this is just going to increase our debt exponentially. And it makes me wonder, is there something that they know that we don't know, right? And I've heard a lot of different theories and ideas, and I'll probably do a big show on this soon about all these indications that the elites perceive that there's some sort of massive geophysical event coming, like a pole shift or something, and that there's all these kind of things being put into place to account for that. And it makes me wonder, it's like, do they know that something bigger is coming? Like there's like a bigger shift coming, and everyone's trying to get out in front of it. But I guess we won't know until we know, right? We won't know until we see things, because secrets of the secrets of the secrets have always been kept from us. And it just seems like there's something like, I don't know, is there something about the world today that I feel it, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it's just that
Yeah.
it's like we're almost living in like a Truman Show or something like that.
Yeah.
What do you
Well,
think?
they got rid of the penny. They're gonna the next like that. I think psychologically, like getting rid of the penny, and then it's just like they're just gonna go farther away from cash. People are they're gonna try to get dollars out of circulation, and it's just another level of government control, right? I mean, that's what's happening. I mean, the fact that they don't want money circulating, they want everything to be a digit, which basically mean the banks would have control and then the government. Like you'd have no control of your assets. And that's why I think until you have physical metals in your hand and you hold it and you go, okay, I have some wealth here that can't be touched, that's outside of the control. And you're seeing states, like Florida now making gold money, and Texas, like all these places, the states are sort of moving in the opposite direction and trying to give people a little bit more control. And then, but the federal government is really trying to control where your money's going and having access. And think about it, if you had all your money tied up in bank and places that you can get access to, they can put a hold on it for whatever reason, whether it's true or not. They could decide that you owe more in taxes. They could do a lot of things. And so I think that there's like behind the scenes, there's this movement away from having any physical money, having anything that you hold, because it gives them just more access to tax you or penalize you. And everybody sees these things happen, day to day, and unfortunately people have had, where their wages are garnished or their situation is like, well, how do people live if the government has access to all your money? And so that's another thing that a lot of people tell us is like they really like the idea of like having some money, some wealth sort of away from the government. And if things really get bad, it gives them the flexibility to go somewhere. So if all your money's in the bank, and let's say you have a dispute with the US government and you try to go somewhere, they're just going to freeze your accounts. You're not going to have access to that money. They're just going to freeze it. And then where are you going to go? How are you going to flee? And you see it a lot of times in some of these countries. You've seen in Lebanon, I know some people that fled Lebanon, wealthy people, and they were not able to take any of their money out of the banks. So there were people that had businesses in Lebanon living there and then had to move to the US to finally get out of there. And they basically came here with nothing. And I actually met a friend of a friend that came here, and we just so happened to be moving and we had some furniture, and they like were moving into an apartment. They had no money. They had like literally just the cash. They had just a little bit of cash. And so we helped them. We gave them some furniture to kind of get started. And they came here and started a business, and, things are happening. But, having all your money tied into the bank is a little scary, because it does give the banks and then the government, two entities that you don't want controlling your money, access to freeze it or hold it. They told me something interesting when they were fleeing Lebanon, that the bank, if they had like $10,000, the bank would say, well, we'll give you 1,000 of, that's all we can. They would just give you a fraction. And so they took whatever they could, got it in cash, and then just fled out of Lebanon. These things can happen anywhere. I mean, once you have the banks in control and the government in control of all of your currency. So I think there's things happening behind the scenes. I think the first thing with the penny, and I know the penny didn't make sense because it costs 3 cents to make 1 cent, but fundamentally, like having a currency outside of the control of a digit or online, I think is a good thing. So it does make me a little concerned that they're going away from it.
Oh, me too. But also, if you look at even under Trump, there's been this massive advancement of AI infrastructure. Project Stargate, I think it was like $500 billion investment, with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman. But also then looking at a lot of the things that we've been covering recently about Palantir. And that, Palantir, because it seems like that, through Elon and through Doge, Silicon Valley and these big kind of this tech empire got access to a lot of the data and information of the American people through Palantir, and kind of building a safer way, an easier way of managing our country. But to me, that really starts to paint the kind of early picture of some sort of technocratic state where
Hmm.
it's like, you think that, okay, whether it's taxes or anything, if you've got AI that is, in some sort of centralized database that is monitoring, everything from our conversations to our GPS movement to our bank accounts, the flow of our money, like everything that they're digitizing, everything that basically this data that's stored on a server somewhere, that becomes the greatest weapon and the greatest threat to our freedom, really.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. And I think, when you look at control, as much as some of these technologies will make things easier, we lose a little of that autonomy that I think most people want in their lives. When I started looking at crypto initially, um, there was these ideas of people getting access to their data that they would control, but then it mutated to, well, it'll just be on the blockchain and the people will have more access. Well, my health information and a lot of these things, I don't want it on the blockchain. I don't want other people to have access. And I know they say there's a closed circuit and they could do all these things, but ultimately, a lot of these data points are going to be used to either say I can, get insurance or not get insurance, or maybe, bills could go up or things could change, or maybe they charge me more because I make more, right? They have information about me. So a lot of these things, I think, a lot of the stuff with crypto, I think started as good ideas. Even Bitcoin started as good ideas, but now have sort of moved into a place where it just gives more control back to tech, which I think is what you've been saying. And those things do make me concerned for me, but probably more importantly for my kids, because with them being on social media, I mean, they're not yet, but who knows what'll happen in the future. And then just this, mutation of data, and then data points and, facial imagery. It becomes quite scary for an everyday person that you're kind of losing control of your identity. And there's this big case with Disney where they're talking about, there's this lawsuit where it's just talking about, they just want to move to kind of AI in terms of movies. There's all this movement now because they think they can save all this money, which I guess in theory they do, but paying people to be actors like creates jobs and it circulates money. If they're able to create a movie and not pay anybody, it just gives all the money to that one organization, which would be Disney. So yeah, so I think these are things that I sort of look at, and also just to go, talk about silver a little bit more. I was, doing some research and sort of looking back at, because there's going to be 170 million ounce shortage this year. Peak silver in terms of production, they say is 2016, and I think that's pretty telling that that's where they think the peak is. Also, if you look at the price of silver was pretty flat from 2016, and it really didn't start moving again probably till about mid 2020. Um, and that set a signal to the mining community. See, the mining community really has decided only recently that silver again is a good place to mine because we're starting to see some price movement. But if you look at silver miners, this is why silver is such an interesting investment. If you look at silver miners, it takes them 10 to 15 years from start to finish to pull silver out of the ground. And so I think there's going to be even more shortages of silver because once silver hit its peak of 50 in 2012 and basically went on a huge decline, silver mining dropped consistently. And so you had this peak in 2016 where they found the 900 million ounces, but ever since then it's been in the 800 million number pretty consistently. And it could hang there. Maybe it drops a little bit from there. But if you look at the shortage that we've seen, yeah, if you look at the price, 2016, it was pretty flat. You're looking at $15, $16. So the silver mining community it wasn't profitable for them. Now, coming in at 36, 37, 38, I think they're going to start doing some silver mining again, start the production again, but it'll take them 10 years to catch up. So that's why I think, and I talked about it in my book, Seth, which I know you looked at, and I sort of had this number of 36, 37 on my radar this year just because of the shortage. And that was even before I thought about any of this military consumption that we're going to have. And the military consumption is pretty high. You have submarines, destroyers, and you have silver heavy, munitions. You have the missiles, Tomahawk, all these things, advanced radar systems, they all use silver. So if we're going to be in this, quasi war for the next, year or 2 or 3 years, the silver consumption could go up pretty steadily, just in the U.S., just in terms of military consumption.
Well, and so I want to pull this chart back up and just ask you a few questions based on this. So, looking at this chart, I want to just see if I'm following something that you're telling me here that I know we've talked about. So, obviously, we saw this huge peak late 2010, right, approaching $50 an ounce in silver. That when that came back down, hitting a low in 2015, basically from 2015 to 2020, it was frozen, right? Between 15, $20 an ounce. Like there was very little movement across that period. Right. And then obviously, COVID hit, we saw a spike. It went to close to 30. And now we're seeing it, regularly now, trading above 30, hitting 35, 36, 37. So am I correct in understanding that like starting say 2014, 15, 16, 17 with silver at such a low, did a lot of companies pull back on silver mining Correct. And shift into gold and other kinds of Correct. Mining? Because if it's like, if I was a silver miner and I went from 2010 being silver at almost $50 an ounce to now it's consistently at say $17 an ounce, I might be Correct. Thinking, okay, how much money can I really make doing this? And so, but then, so we saw a lot of mining companies kind of shifting, but now that we're seeing silver spiking again, but also we've got the AI arms race. We have the continued, military industrial complex pumping out weapons of war, which will probably be increasing and probably already increasing as we speak. So is that going to create a situation where, as you mentioned, that silver, a mine takes 10, 15 years, right, to get going. Yep. So do you think that we're going to see a situation where, or are we already seeing a situation where we're seeing massive shortages in silver versus what the overall market is demanding, especially for just industrial use?
Yeah, and if you look at it, that chart's a good example because silver miners were saying that in 2010, 11, 12, that silver production was going to cost $20 to $25 an ounce. And so once silver broke down to 15, 16, they just shut down. There'd be no reason to mine. There's no profit. And so it always works in 10-year cycles, because if you go back to 2001, the price was like, I don't know, $7 for silver. It started to move up, and then they started in 2003 they were like, okay, we better start mining silver. They started mining silver in the 20, very profitable for them. And then it hit that peak of 50, and they're like, okay, and then it starts to dwindle down, and then it gets below the cost to mine. And then so you have, from 2013 to 2018, 19, just no interest in silver mining. So I think it started to pick back up again in 2020, 2021, 2022. I think they're going to start to mine, but it's going to take them until 2031, 2032, sometimes longer. It can take 15 years for a new mine to. So you look at the catch up, and it's just, it's just business. These miners will just shift into exactly what you said. They'll start mining gold. They'll start mining other elements, other things that they can pull out of the ground. They have to be profitable. And mining gold is much safer, in terms of long term. It's a much safer asset in terms of price. So the mining community in silver right now is like, okay, we're looking good. If we have any mines coming up in the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to be probably significantly profitable. And then, depending on where price goes, and then you just look at labor costs and all of those tools, everything has gone up. So I predict that we'll see in the next 5 years, like, to pull silver out of the ground, I think we're going to see it anywhere from like 30 to $34 an ounce. And that'll lead us to a price of, above ground in the 50, 55, $60 range. And that's pretty normal to have that kind of spread between what the mining is and what they pull it out of the ground and what you can buy it for above ground. So it's a interesting game when you look at mining, and but you really have to be thinking long term. And if you go to a lot of these, conventions that for mining, and you look at Robert Kiyosaki and you look at all these guys, he keeps just holding up silver and silver. So I think there's a pretty massive opportunity right now just because of the lag time to pull silver out of the ground. And then, I think if you couple that with just overall, fear in the equity markets, I still think we're going to see that kind of push on the retail buyers into the silver market. So it's something I look at. Those charts are obviously very telling. And, sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you have to look at it and go 36 silver, how long will it take for me to double my money? And I think that, I would be surprised if we don't see silver pushing 50, 60 in the next 4 or 5 years. And then who knows if the shortages continue and if you see silver mining where they say we can only pull 700 million ounces out of the ground or less, then we're going to have a few 100 million ounce shortage in silver. And I think that'll just increase the price. Because places like the military, they have to have it. So they're just going to continue to pay whatever they need to get that silver. There's no price that they're not going to pay if they need it for the military. So these are things, this is the great thing about it, is like tech, military, solar, all these things, they have to have it. So they're going to pay 50, 60, 70, $80 an ounce. It doesn't matter. They're still going to pay it no matter what the price is.
Because basically, even if it becomes, say it's costing them $35, $40 to pull it out of the ground, they can't just say, okay, well, I quit. They're going to have their customers coming, these massive buyers of Lockheed Martin and Boeing and solar companies, Tesla,
Correct.
Different Elon Musk's companies. So they're going to have to say they can't just stop making it. They're going to see that the price will continue to go up, and that the buyers of silver will have to continue. They have to keep buying. They can't just. It's not like they're buying silver jewelry, which is just something that's purely for aesthetic purposes. Like, these are hardcore industrial use cases for silver.
Yeah, and the only thing that could help in the supply shock that we're seeing in the deficit is recycling, and only 6% is recycled. So you'd have to see recycling go up pretty considerably to help with that deficit, and a lot of times, it doesn't make sense to pull the silver out of the product. Well, obviously, any of the military products they're not going to pull it out of. People don't recycle silver. They don't feel that impetus like they do with gold, right? Because the price is so high in gold. So I think that the only way you don't see this happen is that silver recycling would have to get 10, 15, 20% of the supply. And we just don't see that movement. It was recycling was at 3 or 4%. It's gone up to 6%. So it hasn't moved up pretty steadily. But if you look at gold, relatively speaking, there's a pretty significant number of gold that's out in the world that gets recycled just because where the price is.
And so kind of taking the just the big picture look at all this, we have this, we're kind of on the edge of World War III. And as much as it's great, okay, there's a ceasefire, I don't expect that to last very long. I mean, it's just the nature of things. Not to mention that I really believe that the banking industry and the people pulling the strings of a lot of the heads of government, et cetera, they need to have a war because like look at the euro and the European economy and the various countries over there that are just like completely struggling, not to mention the United States, where we're being told that, inflation's at like record lows, and it's like, I'm going there to buy something. And it's like, oh gosh, like this pen, I used to buy these things for 10 cents a piece, and now they're 80 cents a piece. You go to the grocery store, and candy bars that used to be 25 cents or 50 cents, are now $2. And that's just the small thing. I mean, it's like, I got a quote recently on some HVAC work for my house, and it was like $25,000. It's just like, how
Wow.
is this stuff so expensive? Now I'm doing
Yeah.
it on my own, so I'm going to save like, I don't know, $15,000 by just doing it myself and learning how to do all this stuff. But the point is that it just feels like that we're constantly being told everything's okay, we're good, we're going to enter like an era of peace and prosperity. Yet every indicator shows that this entire system is nearing some sort of reset.
Yeah.
And then you have the technocratic perspective of all this advancement in AI and control over the people and everything. And it just like kind of coming back to it as I think through all these different things, it's like I always just arrive on the place of that, yeah, like this 10-ounce bar of silver right here. I'm holding it in my hand. It's not
Yeah.
traceable. Well, it's not
Yeah.
traceable because I'm putting it on camera. So okay, someone's kind of taking note of this interview and say, okay, so that's got a 10-ounce bar of silver on his desk, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's just not traceable, and it can't be. It can't be, right? And this is what when you
Yeah.
look at different economies, or you look at countries that they do have collapse type scenarios, whether through conflict or civil unrest or whatever it is. You go back to bartering, and that's my perspective, is that it's more of an insurance policy. Like that's what it is for me. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's just an insurance policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say that just as an idea that came, and I and I'm not saying that President Trump doesn't want peace, but I was just thinking that he's really pushed for Powell to lower rates, and I just thinking back to 9/11 when they dropped rates because 9/11 we went to war. Like I w- there could be an argument that if we go to war, maybe he has more of an opportunity to get rates down, which is something he pushed for. Now, I'm not saying he's doing that, but it just made me think of 9/11 because it was like, okay, we're in war. What are we gonna do? We have to drop rates, right? I mean, that was like the first thing they did. They dropped rates and they never moved them back up. And obviously he's been pushing pretty steadily to get rates down. Whether that's going to bring the 30-year mortgage down, time will tell. I think he'll have to find. I think he's going to have to pull some other mechanisms to get the 30-year mortgage down, more than just lowering rates. But yeah, to your point, like something physical, something that people understand. I mean, I think people are surprised when I say that silver's outperformed Bitcoin and the S&P this year. It's like not the story that people are talking about. And obviously they're talking about gold last year, and now silver's making a play. Obviously, you have that 90-to-1 gold to silver ratio, which I think will still get to 70-to-1. 70-to-1 is silver sitting at $47 an ounce. So there's a lot of ideas and ways that silver get to 46 to 48. Any of the scenarios that we talked about, but the idea that people want something physical, they can get it, they own it. That's really the thing that I think most Americans are looking for in this really kind of turbulent environment that we're in.
I agree completely. So, Colin, as we're wrapping up, your company, Noble Gold, if somebody wants to, kind of transfer, say, an IRA or a 401k, or
Yes.
even just, an outright cash purchase, what's that process look like if somebody wants to move and allocate some of their assets into precious metals, which is my belief. Look, I'm not a financial advisor, do your own research. However, like this is probably the only place I feel safe. This and, land, but land you're taxed on, right? So,
Right.
just these
And
core
there's and
values.
there's with land, which I believe in land too, but there is tax. And until you can turn the land into a use that makes sense, it's sort of a burden too, right? Like until it's either you resell it at a bigger price or you farm on it, or whereas with silver, the net cost of holding it is nothing, right? You just have a safe. So people sometimes forget that it's one of the best things about holding a physical metal that is great in this environment is that there's just no cost to have it, right? And it's easy to liquidate, whereas land isn't always easy to liquidate, especially in this environment. It's not
Yeah.
that easy to liquidate real estate in general, with the most homes ever on the market as of today. there's a lot of opportunities for buyers. So I think it just liquidity purposes, precious metals are great. So yeah, everything with us is quick. You call, you talk to a live person. We walk you through the process. You fill out that form, or you can call and just say, "Hey, I heard Collin and Seth. Do you guys have any specials going on? How does the process work?" But basically, you could have everything done in 5 minutes. And an IRA usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to roll over, and then you'd be in precious metals. And the great thing in an IRA is it's yours, you own it. You're the person in charge. We help you with the precious metals, but it's a self-directed IRA, so you're in charge of all the decisions in there. Our fees relative to like a 401k and all that are substantially lower. And it's just a great way to hedge your bet in this kind of turbulent environment. And then also, if you want to get shipped to your house, we can do that too. That takes 5 minutes also to do that.
Perfect. So we've got a website, goldwithseth.com. It takes you right here to the site where you've got a basic form you can fill out, real simple. There's a free guide there as well. Or the phone number 626-654-1906. All that information will be in the show description as well. And again, look, I'm not a financial advisor, but just like my overall gut feeling when I look at the world today and just how divided, how much chaos there is, this I think is one of the safest places, for me, and this is how I'm doing it with my family, that if something happens, I have this insurance policy. And that's, don't go sell your house and get a mortgage on your house to go buy some precious metals, but make sure you've got something, right? Like if you have $100,000 in an IRA, hey, take 10 out, move 10 into silver and gold, just as that insurance policy. So anyway, those are my thoughts. But do you have any closing comments, Collin?
No, I think, listen, it's one of those times in history where there's just so many unprecedented things happening. And then we didn't even get into it, but the tariffs are supposed to come back in a few weeks too. And so that is obviously going to have an effect on the markets too. So there's just a lot happening right now. But if anybody wants to learn from us, you're going to talk to a live person, have a conversation, no pressure environment. Feel free to check out our reviews. We're a family business. We want to earn your business. So I'd love to chat with you and see if it's, the right fit. And we have a gold guide, a silver guide, a platinum guide, so we can send all that stuff to you for free. So just give us a call and mention that you heard us on the Man in America and Seth's show.
Well, Collin, thank you again for coming on, man. It's always good speaking with you.
Thanks, Seth.
All right, take care. Do you keep hearing more cases of your friends and family getting a life-threatening diagnosis of cancer? Or perhaps it's even happened to you? Well, the unfortunate reality is that turbo cancer is now a worldwide epidemic. But the question we should all be asking is, what can I do about it? Well, the good news is that there are therapies that are working and proven in thousands of clinical studies. So one study on PubMed found that breast cancer's growth rate dropped by 40% in only 24 hours after using red light therapy. Another study on prostate cancer found that 49% of the over 400 male participants went into remission with just one red light therapy session. A lymphoma cancer pilot study showed that 3 out of 3 of the patients became cancer-free. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. And you can discover all this information and more in a special training program from investigative medical journalist Jonathan Otto, who will show you how you can use red light, including the specific wavelengths as proven by studies, for all different types of cancer, as well as tinnitus, weight loss, wrinkles, acne, dementia, cognitive function, depression, anxiety, long COVID, jab injuries, stem cell regeneration, lower back pain, sciatica, the whole array of autoimmune diseases, including thyroid disease, arthritis, lupus, and gut disorders, and so much more. In fact, you can get your own in-home red light therapy device risk-free, as you're completely covered by a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 3-year warranty. On top of that, we've got financing options so you can get it now and pay later. And the best thing, folks, is that this technology has become amazingly affordable. It's way less than you'd expect, with the smaller units costing only a couple $100. So just go to myredlight.com to make sure you don't miss out this free special training program and claim the extremely limited time bonus gifts and discounts, which include an additional 10% off with the coupon code SETH. Again, go to myredlight.com to get access to the free training. And if you make a purchase, make sure you use a promo code SETH, that's SETH, to get an additional 10% off the already heavily discounted red light therapy products.